Remembrance Sunday. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Whenever we think of war, we think of soldiers, and when we think of soldiers, we usually think of them as men. However, women have always served in wars, and women serve, of course, in the armed forces around the world. It is often women who face the fallout of war. Today, in Afghanistan, the country faces a famine caused directly by 20 years of war. Mothers are facing the stark choice of their family starving or of selling their teenage daughters into marriage. This is the reality of war. This morning I want to think about one woman whose story I've always found profoundly moving ever since I first heard it as a teenager. For me, this woman epitomizes the bravery, the self-sacrifice, and the sorrow of war. Frank and Angela, two friends who came into school to make the children aware of the Second World War, have in their possession a dress which they showed me, which I could barely bring myself to touch. It is a simple, pretty dress made in England using French cloth, buttons and threads, and finished off with a genuine French label. Everything about this dress had to be French, had to be correct, because this dress, if not perceived as genuine, would serve as a death warrant to its wearer. This was a dress worn by a woman who over it would wear a plain jumpsuit, carry a pack on her back and also a spade. In the dead of night she would jump from a plane flying low over France. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she would bury her parachute and everything she carried which was connected to her home life in England. The woman was no longer the person she had been a few hours ago. Her life now depended on her wits and on the strangers she would soon meet. The woman was totally aware of the dangers ahead. However, she was unaware of just how short her life expectancy could be. The dress I held made me think of Violette Szabo, who was born Violette Reine Elizabeth Bushell in Paris on the 26th of June, 1921. Violette's father was English and her mother was French. From 11, Violette lived with her family in South London. She was fluent in both English and French. Her home life was loving. She left school at 14 to work in Woolworths in Oxford Street. At the outbreak of war, Violette joined the Women's Land Army and moved to work in the armaments factory. At a parade in London, she met Etienne Szabo, an officer in the French Foreign Legion. They were married after a whirlwind romance on the 21st of August 1940. Violette was 19 and Etienne was 31. After their honeymoon, Etienne was sent to North Africa. Violette joined the Auxiliary Territorial Services, and it was while posted in Frodsham, here in Cheshire, that she discovered that she was pregnant. On the 8th of June 1942, she gave birth to her daughter, whom she named Tania. Tania was never to meet her father, for Etienne died in October of that year from wounds sustained in the Second Battle of El Alamein. It was Etienne's death which prompted Violette to train as a field agent in the Special Operations Executive. Violette returned from her first mission in France safely. It was her second that went horribly wrong. On that mission, Szabo and other members of the French resistance were trapped by a panzer regiment. They escaped from the car they were travelling in and ran across a field. Violette fell and twisted her ankle. Dragging herself to the edge of a cornfield, she managed to struggle to an apple tree, from which she held at bay the enemy for over half an hour. thus allowing the men to escape. When her Sten gun ran out of ammunition, she was captured. She gave her name as Vicky Taylor. She was eventually brought for interrogation and torture to Gestapo headquarters in Paris. Before she got there, her name and her activities as an SOE agent were known to her enemies. With the Allies driving deep into France and approaching Paris, the Germans decided to move their most valuable prisoners to Germany. On the 8th of August 1944, Szabo shackled to a fellow resistance operator, Denise Bloch. She and other prisoners began their journey to Germany by train. An Allied attack caused the guards to temporarily abandon the train. Still shackled together at the ankle, Szabo and Bloch managed to get water to the caged male prisoners in the next carriage. After 18 grueling days on the train and utterly exhausted, Violette and the other women prisoners arrived at Ravensbrück concentration camp, a notorious place of disease, starvation and violence, where over 92,000 women were to die during the war. Szabo, Bloch and the other prisoners were put to work in a munitions factory nearby. Violette refused to work on the weapons, which would cause the death of allies. She no doubt suffered the consequences. Instead, she volunteered to fell trees in the hope that the forest would protect her from the cold. The Eastern Prussian winter of 1945 was especially bitter. Despite this, the women were made to stand for roll call in the freezing cold for up to 5 hours each morning. Szabo was dressed in the summer dress she was wearing when she was sent to Germany. The women slept in frozen barracks without blankets. Szabo and 2 other British agents were recalled to Ravensbrück on the 19th or the 20th of January 1945, where they were possibly brutally assaulted and then placed in the punishment bunker, where they were kept in solitary confinement. This abuse finally weakened Szabo's morale, which had remained so strong up to this time. On or before the 5th of February 1945, Violette Szabo, along with Denise Bloch and Lillian Rolfe, neither of whom could walk, were executed in the execution alley at Ravensbrück. Violette was made to kneel and then was shot in the back of the head. She was just 24 years old. On the 17th December 1946, 3-year-old Tanya, together with her grandparents, were invited to Buckingham Palace, where Violette was awarded posthumously by the King the George Cross. This was one of many awards made to the bold, brave, beautiful woman who was Violette Szabo. Leo Marx, the Special Operations cryptographer, gave Violette, whom he remembers as a dark-haired slip of mischief, his own composition as a code poem. For me, this short poem epitomizes the lives that were sacrificed during the Second World War, in which Violette and so many others gave their young lives. It's a yearning for what could have been, what should have been, but was lost. Mark's poem reads thus: The life that I have is all that I have, and the life that I have is yours. The love that I have of the life that I have is yours and yours and yours. Asleep I shall have a rest I shall have, yet death will be but a pause for the peace of my years in the long green grass will be yours and yours and yours. Violette Szabo's story of courage is one of many. The book of the story of her life was titled Carve Her Name with Pride. And her name is carved with pride, like all those who served and died, into one of too many war memorials. We come together on Remembrance Sunday morning to remember those names and also those who have no name. We come to remember the last words, the last smile, the last touch, the pride and the loss, the emptiness that memories alone can fill with love. We remember them. They who bore the flame of freedom, they who laid down their lives, those who died that we might live today, those whose blood brought peace, those whose sacrifice sealed our destiny. These are them whom we remember. We will remember. We do remember, for we must never forget that in Flanders fields the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, they mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amongst the guns below. In Flanders fields and fields across our world, the poppies do still blow.